I thought I was surprising my CEO wife at her company dinner with sunflowers and a smile, but what I overheard her say about our marriage behind those closed doors changed everything. She called me her diversity prop, useful for optics, grateful for scraps, too simple to understand her real world. But Caroline had no idea that her husband, the mechanic she thought would always stay in his place, was about to teach her and her racist lover a lesson about underestimating the wrong man. What happened next wasn't revenge. It was something far more powerful, and it left her empire crumbling while I drove away in a Lamborghini I bought with my own money. They thought they knew who Marcus Cole was, but they were about to find out just how wrong they were. If you're watching this story unfold, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from, because this journey of quiet justice is just getting started. The sunflowers looked perfect in my passenger seat. Yellow petals caught the last bit of evening light as I pulled my clean pickup truck into the parking garage beneath the Whitmore Barlow Foundation Tower, the same building where Caroline worked 60 floors up, running her family's company. I checked myself in the rearview mirror one more time. Fresh haircut, clean shave, my best button down shirt, the blue one Caroline bought me for Christmas, work chinos pressed with a sharp crease down the front. I wanted to look good for her. It wasn't often I showed up to one of her fancy work dinners. Tonight was different though. Today marked exactly 3 years since we got married, and Caroline had been working so hard lately, coming home tired and stressed. I thought maybe surprising her would remind her of the good times, make her smile the way she used to. The flowers were simple, just sunflowers from the corner shop near my garage. Nothing fancy like the arrangements her rich friends probably sent each other, but Caroline always said she liked simple things. At least, she used to say that. I walked through the marble lobby, my work boots quiet on the polished stone. The security guard looked me up and down twice before checking my name on his list. Marcus Cole, I said, handing him my ID. He frowned at his clipboard. Oh, you're Mrs. Whitmore's husband. The way he said it made something twist in my chest, like he couldn't quite believe it. That's right. The dinner's on the 32nd floor, conference room A. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. I watched the numbers climb, holding the sunflowers carefully so I wouldn't crush them. When the doors opened, a woman in a black dress and pearls was waiting for me. Everything about her screamed expensive, from her perfect blonde hair to her shiny shoes. Mr. Cole? She looked surprised. We weren't expecting you until later. I wanted to surprise Caroline. Is that okay? Of course. How sweet. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. If you could just wait in the side lounge for one moment, we'll get the seating arranged. There's been a small mix-up with the place cards. She led me to a small room off the main hallway. Leather chairs, fresh flowers on the coffee table, the kind of flowers that probably cost more than I made in a week. Can I get you anything while you wait? Water? Coffee? I'm fine, thanks. She left me alone with the sunflowers. Through the walls, I could hear voices from the main dining room, laughter, the clink of glasses, Caroline's world, a world where I sometimes felt like a visitor who didn't speak the language. I sat down and checked my phone. A text from Deshawn, my cousin who ran the night shift at the garage. How's the fancy dinner going? Haven't made it in yet. Waiting in some side room. Don't let them make you feel small, cousin. I smiled. Deshawn always knew what to say. The voices next door got louder for a moment. I heard Caroline's laugh, that warm musical sound that made me fall in love with her 5 years ago when she brought her car to my shop. Her BMW had a simple oil leak, but she stayed and talked to me for an hour about everything and nothing. Then I heard a man's voice, deep, confident, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd never had to worry about money. Caroline, you outdid yourself with the turnout tonight. Thank you, Grant. Your donation really made this possible. Grant Barlow. I'd heard that name before. Big investor. Someone Caroline did business with. I'd never met him, but from the way she talked about him, he seemed important to her company. Their voices got quieter. I couldn't make out the words anymore, but something about their tone bothered me. Too familiar, too comfortable. I looked at the door between the lounge and what sounded like a private dining room. It was cracked open just slightly, maybe an inch, just enough for their voices to carry through. I should have stayed in my chair, should have minded my own business, but something pulled me toward that door. Maybe it was the way Caroline's voice sounded different, softer, like how she used to talk to me when we were alone. I stood up slowly, holding the sunflowers. My heart was beating faster, though I couldn't say why. I moved closer to the door, staying in the shadows where no one could see me. The diversity angle really works for the foundation, Caroline was saying. Marrying Marcus was smart business. My blood went cold. Smart business? Grant's voice carried a cruel edge of amusement. That's one way to put it. Don't laugh. It's good optics. A successful white CEO married to a hardworking black man. The board loves it. The press loves it. Donors eat it up. Each word hit me like a punch to the chest. I gripped the sunflowers so hard I probably crushed some of the stems. And what does Marcus think about being your diversity prop? Grant asked. Caroline's laugh was cold, nothing like the warm sound I'd fallen in love with. Marcus thinks what Marcus always thinks, that I married him for love. Poor bastard actually believes it? Marcus is simple, sweet but simple. He fixes cars and comes home to me every night, grateful for whatever scraps of attention I throw his way. He doesn't ask questions about where I go or who I see. My hands were shaking. I wanted to burst through that door, wanted to scream, to demand she take it back, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Speaking of who you see, Grant's voice dropped lower. When can we stop pretending? This sneaking around is getting old. Soon, the Foundation's annual report comes out next month. After that, we can be more public about things. Marcus has served his purpose. How long has this been going on? I whispered to myself. As if she heard me, Caroline continued. 6 months now. Maybe 7. God, Grant, you have no idea how exhausting it is. Pretending to care about his little stories from the garage. Acting like I'm proud when he fixes some old lady's car for free. You could always just leave him. And lose the diversity credibility? No way. Marcus staying put keeps everyone happy. The board, the press, the donors who love our inspiring love story. She made quote marks with her fingers. I couldn't see her, but I could hear it in her voice. Besides, she added, he's useful. He doesn't spend money, doesn't ask for anything, and he makes me look good at events like this. Clean him up, put him in a nice shirt, and people think I'm this amazing woman who fell in love across racial and class lines. What about when he wants kids or starts asking why you work so late? Marcus won't ask. He's too grateful to have landed someone like me, a white woman with money and status. He thinks he hit the lottery. The room was spinning. I reached for the wall to steady myself. The sunflowers fell from my other hand, scattering yellow petals across the dark carpet. I fumbled for my phone with shaking fingers. My hands were so unsteady, it took 3 tries to open the recording app. I pressed record and held it toward the crack in the door. Does he satisfy you? Grant asked. I mean, really? Caroline's laugh was sharp. Marcus is adequate, but he lacks sophistication. He doesn't understand my world, my needs. He thinks taking me to Olive Garden is a romantic date. While I take you to Paris, exactly, you get it, you get me. I wanted to vomit. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of me working double shifts to help pay for her business trips, trips where she was apparently with him. What about the garage? Grant continued. Ever think about shutting it down? Getting him a real job? The garage actually helps the story. My husband, the hardworking mechanic. People love that humble salt of the earth narrative. Plus, it keeps him busy and out of my hair. Just make sure he stays in his place. We can't have him getting ideas above his station. Don't worry, Marcus knows his place. He's grateful for the crumbs I give him. My vision blurred. I had to get out of here before I did something stupid. Before I exploded and gave them what they wanted. A reason to call me angry, unstable, dangerous. I stepped back from the door on legs that felt like jelly. That's when I heard footsteps in the hallway behind me. Excuse me, I turned. A young Asian woman in a simple black dress was watching me with concerned eyes. She looked like she worked for the foundation, maybe middle management. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I couldn't speak, couldn't trust my voice. She looked at the dropped sunflowers, then at the cracked door, then back at my face. Understanding flickered in her eyes. Without saying another word, she reached into her small purse and pulled out a white linen napkin. She wrote something quickly with a pencil stub, then pressed it into my palm. You're not crazy. I heard it too. She squeezed my hand gently. I'm Eva Park, operations manager. Then she was gone, disappearing down the hallway like an angel who delivered exactly the message I needed. I looked down at the napkin in my shaking hand, proof that this nightmare was real, that someone else had witnessed Caroline's betrayal. The main dining room erupted in laughter. Caroline's voice rose above the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment. I forced myself to stand straighter, to breathe. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to hide in this side room like a wounded animal. I walked to the main entrance of the dining room. The hostess who'd seated me earlier was suddenly there, all smiles and efficiency. Mr. Cole, perfect timing. We're just about to serve dinner. The room was elegant, crystal glasses catching candlelight, fresh flowers on every table. Caroline stood at the front in a silver dress that probably cost more than my truck. She looked beautiful, confident, like a woman who had everything she wanted. I watched her scan the room until her eyes found mine. For just a second, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or guilt, but it was gone so fast I might have imagined it. As I was saying, she continued, her voice warm and loving, tonight wouldn't be possible without the continued support of our generous donors. And of course, the unwavering support of my wonderful husband. She raised her glass toward me. The room turned to look. Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Marcus works so hard at his garage, making sure everyone in our community has reliable transportation. He's my rock, my anchor, the man who keeps me grounded and reminds me what really matters in life. More applause, a few awes from the women in the crowd. If they only knew what she'd said about me 5 minutes ago. I picked up a glass from a passing server's tray, raised it toward her, forced my lips into what I hoped looked like a smile. To partnerships, I called out, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Caroline's smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. To partnerships, she agreed. We drank. The wine tasted like ashes in my mouth. I made my way to our table at the front of the room. Caroline came over and gave me an air kiss, her hand on my arm for the cameras. The gesture that used to make me feel special now felt like a performance. You look handsome, she whispered in my ear. I'm so glad you could make it. I wouldn't miss it, I replied. She squeezed my hand. Smile for me, baby. I looked into her eyes, the same green eyes I'd stared into when I proposed to her on the beach in Malibu, when I'd promised to love her forever, through anything. I lifted my glass again, but my eyes stayed cold. Grant Barlow appeared at our table as if summoned. Tall, silver-haired, expensive suit. Everything about him screamed money and privilege. Marcus! He clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. Good to finally meet you, man. Caroline talks about you all the time. I'll bet she does. Mr. Barlow? I shook his hand. His grip was firm, confident, the grip of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. Call me Grant. Any husband of Caroline's is family. Family. The word made my stomach turn. Grant was just telling me about his new yacht? Caroline said, sliding back into her seat. Maybe we could all go sailing sometime. That sounds great, I said. My voice sounded normal, friendly even. Amazing what adrenaline could do. Grant dominated the conversation for the next hour. Stories about business deals, expensive vacations, famous people he'd met. Caroline hung on every word, laughing at his jokes, asking thoughtful questions. I watched them, noticed how she leaned toward him when he spoke, how her eyes lit up in a way they hadn't for me in months, how comfortable they were together. 6 months, she'd said. Maybe 7. As dinner wound down, Caroline leaned close to me. We should head home soon. I have an early meeting tomorrow. With Grant, probably. Of course. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text under the table. Deshaun, don't call tonight. Just be awake. His response came immediately. Always. Grant appeared again as we gathered our things. Marcus, it was great meeting you. Caroline's lucky to have such a dedicated husband. The way he said dedicated made it sound like a weakness. I'm the lucky one, I replied. Caroline's quite a woman. She certainly is. Grant's smile was all teeth. You take good care of her now. I always have. Outside the restaurant, the cool night air felt good on my face. Caroline linked her arm through mine as we walked to the parking garage. That went well, she said. Grant was impressed with you. Good to know I passed the test. She looked at me sharply. What test? Nothing. Just making conversation. In the car, Caroline filled the silence with chatter about the donation numbers, the turnout, the success of the evening. I let her words wash over me without really listening. At a red light, I pulled the linen napkin from my pocket and slipped it into my wallet, right next to our wedding photo. The happy couple on their wedding day. Before I knew she thought of me as a prop, a diversity hire for her life. You're quiet, Caroline said as we pulled into our building's underground garage. Just tired. Long day at the shop. Of course, my poor, hard-working husband. She reached over and squeezed my knee. Let me make you some tea when we get upstairs. Help you relax. Tea. Like that would fix anything. In our condo, Caroline kicked off her heels and headed for the kitchen. I watched her move around our home. Her home, really, since she'd bought it before we got married. Everything in it chosen by her, paid for by her. I set my phone face down on the kitchen counter and sat at the breakfast bar. So, Caroline said, filling the kettle, did you enjoy tonight? I know those events can be a little overwhelming. A little overwhelming, like I was a child who couldn't handle grown-up situations. I heard a lot tonight, I said carefully. Caroline's hand froze on the kettle handle. Oh? What do you mean? Just interesting conversations about business, partnerships, that kind of thing. She turned to face me, studying my expression. Marcus, if something's bothering you, you can tell me. The concern in her voice sounded genuine. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misunderstood what I'd heard, if there was some explanation that would make it all make sense. But then, I thought about Grant's hand on my shoulder, the way they'd looked at each other. 6 months, maybe 7. I think we need to have an honest conversation tomorrow, I said, about us, about where we stand. Caroline's face went pale. Marcus, not tonight. I'm tired and I want to think clearly. I stood up. Let's just go to bed. In our bedroom, we moved around each other like strangers. Caroline went through her nighttime routine in the bathroom while I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. When she came out in her silk pajamas, she hesitated at her side of the bed. Marcus, I love you. You know that, right? I looked at her, really looked at her, trying to find some trace of the woman who'd cried when I proposed, who'd said she couldn't imagine her life without me. I hope we can figure this out, I said instead of answering her question. We lay in bed with our backs to each other. I listened to Caroline's breathing slow and deepen as she fell asleep, but I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling fan, making decisions in the dark. No shouting, no scenes, no being her prop ever again. Around midnight, I picked up my phone and sent one more text. Deshawn, I'm fine. Call you in the morning. Phone on silent. Then I turned off the light and waited for dawn. The next morning came too soon. I woke up before my alarm. Caroline's side of the bed, already empty. I could hear her in the kitchen, making coffee like nothing had changed. I lay there for a minute, listening to the familiar sounds of our morning routine, the coffee grinder, cabinet doors opening and closing, the local news playing softly on the TV. For a second, I almost convinced myself last night was a bad dream, that I'd imagined the whole thing. But then, I saw my wallet on the nightstand, and I remembered the napkin folded inside it. You're not crazy. I heard it too. I got dressed slowly, jeans and a work shirt, my usual uniform for the garage. In the kitchen, Caroline was already dressed for work in a sharp black suit, her hair pulled back in a perfect bun. Good morning, baby. She handed me a cup of coffee, black the way I liked it. You sleep okay? Fine. She studied my face. You sure? You were tossing and turning. I sipped my coffee and didn't answer. Caroline sat down across from me at our small kitchen table. Between us was a jewelry box I'd never seen before. Expensive looking. The kind of box that held something worth more than I made in a month. I have something for you, she said, sliding the box toward me. I didn't touch it. Open it, she urged. Inside was a watch, not just any watch, a Rolex, the kind of thing I'd seen in magazines but never imagined owning. Caroline, I know it's expensive, but you deserve nice things. Last night was, well, it was stressful for everyone. Grant's sense of humor can be pretty crude. Grant's sense of humor, that's what she was calling it. I heard your part too, I said quietly. The color drained from her face. My part? In the conversation, before dinner. For a long moment, we stared at each other. I watched her mind work, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much damage control she needed to do. Marcus, if you heard something that upset you, we should talk about it. Maybe we need couples counseling, to work through any misunderstandings. Misunderstandings. Like there was some innocent explanation for calling our marriage good business, for talking about keeping me in my place. We need honesty first, I said, before any counseling. Caroline's mask slipped for just a second. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went cold. Then she caught herself and forced a smile. Of course, honesty is important in any marriage. She pushed the watch box closer to me. We'll talk tonight, I promise. I stood up and grabbed my keys. I need to get to work. Marcus, wait. But I was already heading for the door. I left the watch sitting on the table, untouched. The garage was my sanctuary. The smell of motor oil and metal, the satisfying sound of tools against engines. Work, that made sense. Problems I could actually fix. I was under the hood of a Honda Civic when I heard the bell above the front door chime. I looked up to see Eva Park standing in the doorway, looking nervous. We're not open yet, I called out. I know. I I have an appointment. For my car. She held up a slip of paper. I called yesterday. I wiped my hands on a rag and walked over to the front desk. Sure enough, Eva Park was in the appointment book for 9 a.m., a small repair on a Toyota Camry. You made this appointment after the dinner, I said. She nodded. I needed an excuse to talk to you. I looked out the window to make sure we were alone, then motioned her into my small office behind the service area. You didn't have to come here, I said. What you did last night was enough. No, it wasn't. Ava sat down in the chair across from my desk. What I heard, it wasn't right. And it wasn't the first time. What do you mean? Eva took a deep breath. Grant Barlow has a pattern. He makes these kinds of comments about people, racist jokes, crude remarks about women, usually when he thinks only the right people are listening. My hands clenched into fists. And Caroline? I've seen them together at company events, business lunches, the way they look at each other. It's not professional. I leaned back in my chair, processing this. How long have you known? I started suspecting about 6 months ago, but last night was the first time I heard it confirmed. Eva reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. Look, I don't know what you're planning to do, but if you need someone who witnessed what happened, if you need someone to back up your story, call me. I took the card. Eva Park, Operations Manager, her direct phone number written on the back. Why? I asked. You don't even know me. This could hurt your job. Because it's right, she said simply. Because nobody should have to go through what you're going through alone. After Eva left with her car keys, and after I'd actually fixed a real problem with her Camry's alternator, I sat in my office and wrote 3 words on a sticky note. No scenes, no lies, no prop. I stuck it to my computer monitor where I'd see it every day. The bell chimed again around noon. This time it was Mrs. Alvarez, one of my regular customers. She was in her 70s, a sweet lady who always brought me homemade empanadas when she came in. Marcus, micho, she said, hugging me like a grandmother. How are you? You look tired. Just working hard, Mrs. Alvarez. What can I do for you today? She led me out to the parking lot where her son was waiting by a vintage 1992 300ZX. The car was beautiful, but I could tell from the way it was sitting that it had some serious engine problems. This is my baby, she said, patting the hood. I bought her new 30 years ago. Miguel here says she needs a complete rebuild, but I trust your hands more than any of these other shops. I spent the next hour going over the car with Miguel, explaining what needed to be done. It was going to be expensive work, but Mrs. Alvarez didn't flinch when I gave her the estimate. You do good work, she said. Fair prices, honest service, that's rare. These days. As we were finishing up the paperwork, Mrs. Alvarez mentioned that her son needed help installing a wheelchair ramp at his house. It's not car work, Miguel said apologetically, but I know you're good with your hands, and the contractor we hired flaked out on us. I can take a look after I close up shop, I offered. No charge. Mrs. Alvarez's eyes filled with tears. Mijo, you have such a good heart. Your wife is lucky to have you. Lucky. If only she knew. After they left, I found myself thinking about what Mrs. Alvarez had said, about honest service and good hearts, about the kind of man I wanted to be, regardless of what Caroline thought of me. I was still thinking about it when Grant Barlow walked through my front door. He looked completely out of place in the garage. Expensive suit, shiny shoes that had never seen a day of real work. He walked around like he owned everything he saw. Marcus, my man. He clapped me on the back like we were old friends. Nice little operation you got here. I didn't answer, just waited to see what he wanted. Grant pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and set it on my workbench. It was thick, unsealed. I could see the edge of cash inside. What's this? A little something to help with the shop. You know, upgrade the equipment. Maybe take a vacation. Grant tapped the envelope twice with his finger. Consider it a gift from a friend. I stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. How much? Enough to make things easier for a while. Maybe give you and Caroline some space to work things out. Space. He meant space for him to move in closer. And what do you want in return? Grant's smile was all teeth. Nothing specific, just understanding. Between men. Understanding about what? About how things work in Caroline's world, about knowing your place and staying in it. The envelope sat between us like a snake. I could feel Grant watching me, waiting to see if I'd take his money, if I'd make this easy for him. I need to think about it, I said finally. Of course, take your time. Grant headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Marcus? This conversation stays between us, right? Caroline doesn't need to know about this little talk. After he left, I locked the envelope in my desk drawer without opening it. My hands were shaking with anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. No scenes. That evening, I drove to Caroline's office building. I'd called ahead and asked to see her for 5 minutes. Something about returning a key fob she'd left in my truck. It was a lie, but I needed an excuse to get into her office. I needed witnesses for what I was about to do. The security guard in the lobby logged my visit. Time, date, purpose. I smiled and made small talk while he wrote everything down. Caroline's office was on the 15th floor. Glass walls, expensive furniture, a view of the city that probably cost more than most people's houses. Her assistant, a young guy named Michael, greeted me at the elevator. She's in a conference call, but she said she'd squeeze you in. Through the glass walls, I could see Caroline at her desk, talking on the phone. She looked up when she saw me and held up one finger. 1 minute. I waited in the hallway where the security cameras could see me clearly, where anyone walking by could witness what happened next. When Caroline finally waved me in, I walked to her desk and pulled Grant's envelope from my jacket. I set it down in front of her, still sealed. "What's this?" she asked. "Grant stopped by the shop today. Left this for me." Caroline's face went white. She glanced at her assistant, who was pretending not to listen from his desk outside. "Marcus, we shouldn't discuss this here." "I'm not discussing anything. I'm returning something that doesn't belong to me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out Eva's napkin, placing it under one corner of the envelope. "Along with this." Caroline recognized the napkin immediately. Her eyes darted to the security camera in the hallway, then back to me. "Are you trying to ruin me?" she whispered. "I'm asking you to tell the truth. At least once." I turned and walked out of her office, nodding politely to Michael as I passed. In the elevator, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. For the first time since this nightmare started, I was the one making the moves. Later that afternoon, Eva called me. "Can you meet me at my office? I found something I think you should see." Her office was smaller than Caroline's but warmer. Pictures of family on her desk. A small plant by the window that actually looked healthy. "I was going through some old files," Ava said, "and I found this." She turned her computer screen toward me. It was a photo of me, asleep on our couch after pulling a double shift at the garage. I had grease on my cheek and my work clothes were rumpled. I looked exhausted but peaceful. "This was Caroline's phone wallpaper 2 months ago," Eva said quietly. "I saw it when she was showing me something on her phone." I stared at the photo. Caroline had taken it without me knowing, had chosen to see it every time she looked at her phone. "She cared once," Eva said. "I thought you should know that." I saved the photo to my phone, my chest tight with complicated emotions. Maybe Caroline had loved me once. Maybe some part of her still did, but that didn't change what she'd said about me, what she'd done. "Thank you," I told Eva, "for everything." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to tell the truth," I said. "The question is whether she'll join me." That night, Caroline came home early with takeout from my favorite Thai place. She'd changed out of her work suit into jeans and a soft sweater. She looked younger, more like the woman I'd married. "I thought we could eat on the floor," she said, "like we used to when we were first dating." We spread the food out on the coffee table and sat on the living room rug. For a few minutes, we didn't talk about the elephant in the room. We just ate pad thai and spring rolls and remembered better times. Remember our first date? Caroline asked. That food truck outside the beach? You got mustard on your dress, and you gave me your jacket to cover it up. She smiled, and for a moment it reached her eyes. You were so nervous. You were way out of my league. Still are. Don't say that. Caroline reached over and touched my hand, just briefly. Marcus, I've been cruel. I know that. I've said things, done things that I'm not proud of. I looked at her, really looked at her. What things? You know what things. Her voice was barely a whisper. I want to go to counseling. I want to fix this. Only if you tell me the truth first. All of it. Caroline's hand was still touching mine. I could feel her wedding ring against my skin. Tomorrow, she said. Let's just have tonight. We cleaned up the dishes together, moving around each other in the kitchen like we had 1,000 times before. When we were done, Caroline curled up on the couch and patted the cushion next to her. But something felt wrong about pretending everything was normal, about acting like we could just skip over the truth and go back to the way things were. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight, I said. Marcus, please. I need space to think. Caroline nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I understand. I was almost to the guest room when she called my name. Marcus, I do love you. Whatever else you think about me, that's true. I turned to look at her, curled up small on our big couch. For a moment, I almost went back to her, almost chose the easy path. But then, I thought about Grant's envelope, about the way she'd laughed when she called me simple, about 6 months, maybe 7. Good night, Caroline. I closed the guest room door and sat on the narrow bed, my phone in my hands. At 6:30 a.m., my phone would buzz with a message that would change everything. But tonight I just sat in the dark and tried to figure out how to put my life back together. Outside, the city hummed with late night traffic, people going about their lives, facing their own problems, making their own choices about who to trust and who to let go. I thought about Mrs. Alvarez and her kind words, about Eva risking her job to stand up for what was right, about Deshawn always having my back, about all the good people in my life who saw value in me that Caroline had forgotten. Or maybe she'd never seen it at all. My phone buzzed with a text from Deshawn. How you doing, cousin? Getting stronger, I typed back, and for the first time in days, that felt true. My phone buzzed at exactly 6:30 a.m., jolting me awake in the guest room bed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. I'm sorry. This isn't right. Aiden. Below the message was a link to an Instagram story. My hands shook as I tapped it. The mall video was short, maybe 15 seconds. Caroline at the microphone during last night's dinner, raising her glass with a bright smile. To my supportive husband Marcus, who keeps me grounded and reminds me that not all heroes wear capes. Some just wear coveralls and get their hands dirty for a living. The crowd laughed, polite, cultured laughter that had an edge to it, like they were all in on some joke I wasn't part of. But it was the caption that made my blood run cold. When you marry diversity but he doesn't know his place, followed by a string of laughing emojis. The video had already been shared dozens of times. Comments were pouring in. Yikes! Imagine being that clueless. Someone should tell him she's slumming it. LOL. I sat on the edge of the bed watching my humiliation go viral among Caroline's circle. Rich people and their friends passing around my pain like entertainment. Another text came in from the same number. I'm an intern at the foundation. I was working the event. This is wrong. I'm sorry. Aiden, a kid who barely knew me but had more decency than my own wife. I heard movement in the main bedroom. Caroline's alarm going off. The shower starting. Her normal morning routine, like nothing had changed. I got dressed quickly and grabbed my keys. I needed to get out of here before I said something I'd regret. The garage felt like a fortress. I unlocked the bay doors and let the morning air flow through, carrying away some of the tightness in my chest. I had 3 cars scheduled for today, including finishing Mrs. Alvarez's 300ZX. Work would help. It always did. I was elbow deep in the Nissan's engine when my phone rang. Caroline's mother. Marcus. Vivian Whitmore's voice was ice cold. We need to talk. Mrs. Whitmore, I've seen the social media situation. It's unfortunate, but these things happen. The important thing is not to overreact. Overreact, like I was the problem here. Caroline made a mistake, Vivian continued, but marriages require forgiveness. Surely you understand that your position in this family comes with certain responsibilities. My position. There it was again. What responsibilities are those? Discretion, loyalty, understanding that Caroline's reputation affects more than just herself. The foundation employs hundreds of people. The family has obligations. And what about Caroline's obligations to me? Vivian's laugh was sharp. Marcus, dear boy, men like you should be grateful for the opportunities you've been given. Don't throw away your future over hurt feelings. Men like me. The words hung in the air like a slap. I need to get back to work, Mrs. Whitmore. Think carefully about your next steps, she said. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. After she hung up, I sat in the quiet garage for a long time. 3 years of family dinners with that woman, 3 years of her polite smiles and backhanded compliments, and now I finally understood what she really thought of me. The bay door chimed, and Deshawn walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and a bag from the donut shop. Figured you might need some fuel, he said, settling into the folding chair by my workbench. I showed him the video. Deshawn watched it twice, his face getting darker each time. Cousin, he said finally, you know I got your back no matter what, but this crosses lines. I know. What you gonna do? I looked around the garage, at the tools I'd bought with my own money, at the customer photos taped to the wall, people whose cars I'd fixed, whose problems I'd solved, at the small business I'd built with my own hands. I'm going to tell the truth, I said. All of it, in their world, on their terms. Deshawn nodded slowly. You need help? Yeah, but not the kind you're thinking. I called Eva from the shop phone around noon. I need a favor, I said when she answered. A big one. What do you need? I need you to set up a meeting, a vendor appreciation event, same room as the dinner. Make it look official. There was a long pause. Marcus, what are you planning? I'm planning to return something that belongs to Grant in front of witnesses. The envelope? Among other things. Eva was quiet for another moment. This could backfire. It could hurt you worse than it hurts them. I know, but I can't keep living like this, pretending everything's normal while they laugh at me behind my back. Okay, she said finally, but we do this right. Professional, clean. I'll set up a small vendor appreciation coffee. 30 minutes max. Light refreshments. I'll invite the same crowd from the dinner. Ava, this could cost you your job. Let me worry about that. After we hung up, I spent the rest of the day working on cars and thinking about what I wanted to say. How to do this with dignity. How to take back my story without becoming the angry black man they expected me to be. That evening, I went home to pack. Caroline was in the living room when I walked in, still in her work clothes. She looked up from her laptop with red-rimmed eyes. Marcus, we need to talk about the video. I've seen it. It was taken out of context, posted by some intern who completely misunderstood. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop. I went to the bedroom and pulled out the small duffel bag I used for overnight trips. 3 work shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, my good boots, the ring box from our wedding. Caroline appeared in the doorway. What are you doing? Packing? Where are you going? I didn't answer. I took off my wedding ring and set it on the dresser next to the expensive watch she'd tried to buy me with. Two symbols of a marriage that had been a lie from the start. Marcus, please, don't do this. We can fix this. I looked at her standing there in her perfect clothes in our perfect condo that she'd paid for with money she'd inherited. Everything about our life together had been on her terms. Even leaving would be on her terms if I let it, but I wasn't going to let it. Honesty was the only thing I asked for, I said, pulling a piece of paper from my pocket. I'd written it that afternoon in careful block letters. Honesty was the only thing I asked for. I left the note on the dresser and picked up my bag. Marcus, Caroline followed me to the front door. You can't just leave. We're married. We have a life together. We had a performance together, I corrected. There's a difference. I locked the condo door behind me and walked to the elevator. Caroline didn't follow. The garage had a small studio apartment upstairs that I'd never used. It was basic, just a bed, a tiny bathroom, and a kitchenette. But it was mine, paid for with money I'd earned. I dropped my bag on the bed and went downstairs to work. Mrs. Alvarez's 300ZX needed a few final adjustments before she could pick it up tomorrow. Around midnight, Deshaun showed up with a bag of chips and two sodas. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Too much thinking to do. You want to talk about it? I told him about the vendor meeting, about my plan to play the audio recording, about how I was going to handle this whole situation. You sure about this, cousin? Once you pull that trigger, there's no going back. I'm sure. Deshaun crunched his chips thoughtfully. You know what my grandmother used to say? She said you don't have to torch a bridge to cross it. Sometimes you just walk away and let the current take it. What's that supposed to mean? Means you already won, Marcus. You know who you are now. You know your worth. You don't need their approval or their acknowledgement. You just need to live your truth. I thought about that as I worked on the Nissan, about truth and dignity and the difference between revenge and justice. By 2 a.m., the car was purring like new. I cleaned my tools and washed my hands in the small sink. Deshaun had fallen asleep in the folding chair, snoring softly. I covered him with a shop towel and went upstairs to shower. The water felt good on my shoulders. Clean, washing away the residue of 3 years of lies. The next morning brought a text from Eva. Vendor appreciation coffee set for Thursday, 10th a.m. Same room. 15 people confirmed, including Grant and Caroline. I stared at the message for a long time. In 48 hours, I would face them all again. But this time, I'd be the one controlling the narrative. I spent the day finishing customer jobs and thinking through exactly what I wanted to say. How to do this without destroying myself in the process. Mrs. Alvarez came to pick up her 300ZX around noon. She was delighted with the work, running her hands over the hood like she was greeting an old friend. She sounds beautiful, she said as the engine hummed. Like the day I bought her. She's got a lot of good years left. Mrs. Alvarez handed me a check, then surprised me with another hug. Marcus, mijo, you look different today, stronger. I feel different. Good. A man should know his worth. After she left, I sat in the office and called the number Grant had given me. He answered on the first ring. Marcus, good to hear from you. Have you thought about our conversation? I have. I'd like to return what you gave me. Return it? Marcus, that money is a gift. I'll be at the Whitmore Foundation tomorrow morning at 10. Vendor appreciation coffee. I'll give it back then. Marcus, I don't think that's wise. I hung up. An hour later, my phone rang again. Caroline this time. Marcus, Grant called me. He says you're planning something stupid. I'm planning something honest. Please don't do this. Think about what you're risking. Think about us. I have been thinking about us. That's the problem. Where are you staying? I'll come over. We can talk this through. There's nothing to talk through, Caroline. You made your choices. Now, I'm making mine. That evening, I drove through the city, past the building where Caroline worked, past the restaurant where she'd humiliated me, past all the places that used to mean something to us. I thought about the man I'd been when I met her, confident in my work, proud of what I'd built with my hands. Somewhere along the way, I'd let her world convince me I wasn't enough, that I should be grateful for scraps of attention from someone who saw me as a prop. But that man was gone. The man driving through these streets tonight knew his worth, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it from him again. My phone buzzed with one last text. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'm proud of you. Deshawn. I smiled and texted back. See you on the other side. Tomorrow, I would face them all. I would tell my truth, and then I would walk away and build something new, something real, something mine. Thursday morning came crisp and clear. I woke up in the studio apartment above my garage feeling more rested than I had in months. No pretending, no walking on eggshells, just me and the truth I was about to tell. I dressed carefully. Clean jeans, pressed work shirt, my good boots. Not trying to be someone I wasn't, but putting my best foot forward. This was about dignity, not costume. Deshawn was waiting downstairs with coffee and breakfast sandwiches. You ready for this? He asked. As ready as I'll ever be. You remember what we talked about? I nodded. Keep it simple. Keep it honest. Don't let them make me the villain. At 9:30, I drove to the Whitmore Foundation building, the same parking garage where this whole nightmare had started a week ago. But today felt different. Today, I wasn't the man who'd brought sunflowers to surprise his wife. Today, I knew exactly who I was dealing with. I rode the elevator to the 32nd floor, carrying Grant's unopened envelope in my jacket pocket. The recording was ready on my phone. 5 seconds. That's all I needed. The vendor appreciation coffee was set up in the same private dining room where I'd overheard Caroline's betrayal. Eva had done a good job making it look official. Coffee urns, pastries, a small banner thanking local business partners. People were already mingling when I walked in. I recognized most of them from the dinner. Donors, board members, Caroline's inner circle. They looked at me with curious eyes, probably wondering why the mechanic was at a business event. Grant was near the coffee station, talking to two men in expensive suits. When he saw me, his face went tight. Marcus, he called out, walking over with forced cheer. Didn't expect to see you here. Eva invited local vendors. I service a lot of cars for Foundation employees. Of course, Grant's smile was all teeth. Speaking of which, have you thought any more about our conversation? I pulled the envelope from my jacket and held it between us. Actually, I brought this back. You left it at my shop. Grant's eyes flicked around the room. A few people were looking our way now. Marcus, maybe we should discuss this privately. Nothing to discuss. You left something on my workbench. I'm returning it. The room was starting to take notice. I saw Eva by the pastry table, her eyes alert. Caroline hadn't arrived yet. This is neither the time nor the place, Grant said through gritted teeth. Seems like exactly the right time and place to me. Before Grant could respond, Caroline walked in. She was perfectly put together as always, but I could see the strain around her eyes. She spotted us immediately and started walking over. Marcus, her voice was carefully controlled. What are you doing here? Vendor appreciation, I said simply. Eva thought it would be nice to thank the local businesses that support the foundation. Caroline's eyes darted between me and Grant, then to the envelope in my hands. Ladies and gentlemen, Eva called out from the front of the room, if I could have your attention for just a moment. The conversations died down. Everyone turned to look at her. I want to thank you all for coming this morning. It's important that we recognize the local partners who help make our work possible. Eva's voice was steady, professional. I'd like to invite Marcus Cole to say a few words about the small business community's relationship with the foundation. A polite smattering of applause. Caroline's face had gone pale. I walked to the front of the room, my heart beating steady and strong. No racing pulse, no shaking hands, just calm purpose. Thank you, Eva, and thank you all for being here. I looked around the room, meeting eyes. I've had the privilege of servicing vehicles for many of you over the past few years. It's honest work, and I'm proud of it. Nods around the room. So far, so good. I believe in honesty, in calling things what they are, in treating people with dignity, regardless of their background or bank account. I paused, letting that sink in. That's why I wanted to share something with you today. Caroline was shaking her head slightly. Grant had moved closer to the door. I pulled out my phone. Sometimes we hear things that change how we see the world, how we see ourselves, how we see the people we thought we knew. Marcus, Caroline said sharply, don't. 5 seconds, I said, looking directly at her. That's all I need to tell the truth. I pressed play on the recording. Caroline's voice filled the room, clear as a bell. Marrying Marcus was smart business. The diversity angle really works for the foundation. And he's useful, doesn't ask questions, doesn't spend money, makes me look good at events. I stopped the recording there. 5 seconds, like I'd promised myself. The silence in the room was deafening. That was recorded at last week's dinner, I said quietly. Before I was officially invited into the room, Grant stepped forward. This is ridiculous. Caroline was obviously joking. No, I said, cutting him off. She wasn't joking, and neither am I. I pulled out my wallet and removed a credit card, the supplemental card Caroline had given me for emergencies. I'd never used it. I set it on the table next to Grant's envelope. I don't need your money, I said to Grant, and I don't need to be anyone's diversity prop, I said to Caroline. Caroline's eyes were bright with tears. Marcus, please, you're taking this out of context. What context makes it okay to call your husband a useful prop? The room was dead silent. I could hear the coffee machine gurgling in the corner. I looked around at all their faces, some shocked, some uncomfortable, some trying to pretend this wasn't happening. I wanted you to know, I said to the room, that I heard what was said about me. I know what some of you think about people like me, and I want you to know that I'm not angry about it. That surprised them. I could see it in their faces. I'm disappointed, but I'm not angry, because your opinion of me doesn't change who I am. It doesn't change the value of my work or the respect I've earned from people who matter. I turned to Eva. Thank you for organizing this, and thank you for having the courage to stand up for what's right. Eva nodded, her eyes bright. I looked at Caroline one last time. I hope someday you find someone who loves you enough to be honest with you, and someone you respect enough to be honest with in return. Then I walked out. No dramatic exit, no slammed doors, just a man who'd said his piece and was moving on with his life. Behind me, I heard the murmur of shocked voices starting up again. But I didn't look back. 2 weeks passed quietly. I kept my head down at the garage, servicing cars, building my business. The story had spread through Caroline's social circle, but it hadn't made the news. Rich people preferred to handle their scandals privately. I got a few new customers, word of mouth from people who respected what I'd done. Mrs. Alvarez brought her nephew's truck in for an oil change. Eva referred a friend whose BMW needed transmission work. Deshawn helped me repaint the garage bay on a Saturday. We worked in comfortable silence, rolling fresh white paint over the scuffed walls. You seem different, he said during a break. How so? Lighter. like you've been carrying a heavy load and finally put it down. He was right. I slept better, ate better, looked at myself in the mirror without cringing. Got something to show you, I said, leading him to the back of the garage. Under a tarp was a car I'd bought the week before, a used Lamborghini Gallardo, silver, 10 years old but immaculate. Deshaun whistled low. Damn, cousin, where'd this come from? Client connection? Estate sale? Previous owner took good care of her. I ran my hand along the sleek hood. Bought her with my own money. Cash. This is about more than just a car, isn't it? Yeah, it is. I'd bought the Lambo because I could. Because I'd always admired them. Because it was beautiful and fast and mine. Not a status symbol, not a middle finger to Caroline. Just something that brought me joy. We spent the afternoon going over the engine. It was a work of art, precise, powerful, honest in its engineering. 3 weeks after the vendor meeting, I was driving the Lambo on a Tuesday morning, heading to pick up parts for a customer's Jeep. I stopped at a coffee shop on the boulevard that ran past Caroline's office building. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see her building rising into the morning sky. Glass and steel and ambition. I was sitting in the Lambo, sipping coffee and checking my phone when someone tapped on the passenger window. Caroline. She looked different, thinner. Her perfect hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup. She was wearing jeans and a plain sweater instead of her usual business armor. I rolled down the window. Hi, she said quietly. Hi. Can we talk? Just for a minute? I looked at her for a long moment, then unlocked the passenger door. She slid in, looking around at the leather interior, the sophisticated dashboard. Nice car, she said. Thanks. We sat in silence for a minute. The engine ticked as it cooled. I came to apologize, Caroline said finally. For real this time. Not damage control. Not spin. Just, I'm sorry. I waited. What I said about you, about our marriage, it was cruel. It was wrong. And it wasn't even true. Which part wasn't true? Caroline's voice was barely a whisper. All of it. I did marry you for love. I do. I did care about you. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. I started believing my mother's voice in my head instead of my own heart. What about Grant? She flinched. That's over. Has been since the day after the vendor meeting. He showed his true colors when things got uncomfortable. I nodded, but didn't say anything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she continued. I know I can't. Take back what I said, or undo the hurt I caused. But I needed you to know that the woman who said those things, that wasn't who I wanted to be. But it was who you were, I said gently, at least for a while. Yes. Tears were running down her cheeks now. It was. I handed her a napkin from the coffee shop. I'm not coming back, Caroline. I know. I hope you figure out who you want to be, and I hope it's someone you can be proud of. She nodded and wiped her eyes. What about you? Are you happy? I looked out at the city morning, people walking to work, living their lives, facing their own challenges. I'm getting there, I said honestly. Caroline reached for the door handle, then stopped. Marcus, for what it's worth, you were always good enough. More than good enough. I was the one who wasn't ready for what we had. After she got out and walked away, I sat in the Lambo for a few more minutes, watching the city wake up around me. My phone buzzed with a text from Deshaun. Lunch later, Mrs. Chen wants to talk to you about servicing her whole fleet. I smiled and typed back, Sounds good. Business is looking up. I started the engine, loving the deep rumble that came from beneath the hood. The sound of power and precision and things working exactly as they should. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught a glimpse of Caroline in my rearview mirror. She was standing on the sidewalk, watching me drive away. Some mornings, I still parked on that street for coffee. Sometimes I saw her through the office windows, working at her desk, trying to rebuild whatever was left of her foundation's reputation. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a message. It was just a man who liked good coffee and a nice drive before work. A man who knew his worth. A man who'd found his way back to himself. The Lambo accelerated smoothly as I merged into traffic, carrying me toward whatever came next. The sound of the engine was like a promise. There was still road ahead, still places to go, still good work to be done. In the distance, the city stretched out before me, full of possibility. I was ready for all of it. 6 months later, Marcus Cole's garage had expanded to a second bay. Word had spread about the mechanic who did honest work for fair prices, who treated every customer with respect regardless of what they drove. Mrs. Alvarez brought him empanadas every month. Ava stopped by whenever her car needed service, and they'd become genuine friends. Deshaun had quit his night shift job to work full time with Marcus, and they were considering opening a second location. Caroline Whitmore resigned from the foundation 3 months after the vendor meeting. The board, uncomfortable with the negative attention, had made it clear her position was no longer tenable. She sold the family business and moved to Portland, where she worked at a small nonprofit that provided job training for formerly incarcerated individuals. She never married again. Grant. Barlow's investment firm lost several major clients after word of his behavior spread through the business community. He moved to Florida and started over with a smaller operation. And every Tuesday morning, Marcus Cole still bought coffee from the shop on the boulevard, not because he was making a point, but because they made the best coffee in the city, and life was too short not to enjoy the small pleasures when you found them. Some victories aren't loud. Some victories are just the quiet satisfaction of knowing who you are and refusing to be anything less. This was one of those victories.